Hey everyone, welcome to Wishing Well BBQ. I'm Dustin Wells, and today I'm going to show you how I do my competition ribs. Let's do it. I'm out here getting some extra practice on my competition style ribs, and I wanted to show you guys exactly what I do so that I get the perfect rib for those judges. And hey, you know what? Even if you're not a competition person, these are some really awesome ribs that you can make to impress all of your friends. And I'm going to show you how I prepare these ribs for the smoker right now. Before I show you how I trim these ribs for competition, I do want to show you what I look for whenever I'm going to purchase ribs. So the one thing that I'm looking for is I'm looking for a big rack of ribs. I'm looking for St. Louis cut spare ribs. That's really going to give us a great presentation when these ribs are done. And I'm looking for some thickness. We're going to want some really thick ribs whenever we serve them to the judges. Another thing I'm looking for is I'm looking for some marbling. I want to see some strands of fat running through the meat. That's going to give me a really tender rib, and those judges are going to love that. I just want to go ahead and pat the meat dry. That's the first thing I want to do. Dry meat is a lot easier to trim and a lot easier to work with. All right, so the very first thing that I like to do when I am trimming these ribs is I like to just go ahead and flip it over and take off this skirt. And what I want to do is I want to square these ribs up. So on this side, I'm going to cut off that last bone. And I'm just going to follow right down the middle here. Now we're going to worry about this side, and there's all these little bones, probably about 3 or 4 bones. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to find one of those bones, and I'm just going to cut right down the middle here and take that piece off. Now you can see that we've got a nice square shape going on here. That looks really good, and if we flip it over, oh yeah, that looks great. So now the next step that we want to do is we want to take off any extra fat that we don't want to eat or that we don't want our judges to eat. And on this end, there's a really thick piece that's not really great that we want to get rid of. So I'm just going to cut that off, trim it, and get some of this extra fat, some of this extra silver skin, get it off of there. All right, now I'm going to show you the next part, which is taking the membrane off. We want to take this membrane off. It's really chewy and it's not really good for a judge, and it just doesn't, it's not really fun to chew on anyway. So I'm going to show you how I take that off. So the technique that I like to use, I like to fold my paper towel here, and I like to get a butter knife, and I like to just run right under this membrane. Now just get right under there, and we're just going to slowly pull up. And get under there. Okay, we've created a little tab here. I'm gonna take my paper towel, I'm gonna grab it, and if you're lucky, it'll come off in one pull. Nice. The next step that I want to do is I want to take a little bit more of a heavy duty knife, and there are these rib tips. Whenever you're cooking for competition, you definitely don't want to have those rib tips up there because they're tiny and they're chewy, and you just don't want that for your presentation. If you're just eating this with your family, hey, you can leave them, no big deal. But I'm going to cut them off, and I'm going to look for about the 6th bone or so, right here, the tallest bone. I'm just going to find, right there it is. I'm just going to jab my knife down in it. I'm going to work my way right across. Now I've got some really nice square bones up here, and just check this out. This is a great piece of meat because it's all even, all the way across. It's evenly sized. It's nice and thick. It has some really good marbling. This is going to be great for a judge. And now I want to show you how I season them and get them ready for the smoker. All right, the first thing that I want to do to season these ribs is I want to put some yellow mustard on them. That's going to make a really good binder. I believe that it just gives a really good color. You don't have to go too terribly heavy with it, just enough to really coat these ribs. I'm gonna go ahead and get both sides here. And for this cook, I'm gonna use my barbecue rub. This is what I make here at the house. And hey, this has done really well for me in some competitions, and I'm gonna put that on the rub. I wanna start on the bone side first because the other side is my presentation side. So I really wanna make sure that looks good. I'm just gonna start and kind of like a typewriter. I just wanna go across. This rub has some salt, has some pepper, some garlic, brown sugar, some other good things that are gonna make this rib turn out amazing. And this rub is gonna give a really good color on the smoker and when they're done. Now, if this looks like I'm using way too much seasoning, it's not gonna be that much seasoning because later on in our process, we're gonna wrap these up with some butter, brown sugar, and honey, and it's really gonna mellow out all of these spices. And then when we glaze them at the end, that'll just bring all of those flavors back to life. That looks great, and this rib is ready for the smoker. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and get the rest of these ribs ready, and we'll come back to you. Now that we've got all these ribs prepped, we're ready to put them on the smoker. Now, as I go to place these ribs on the smoker, I do want to bunch them up. That way they have a nice presentation and all that meat is pushed together. When you pull these off the smoker later, the way you put them on, that's the way they're going to look. So we're going to get these ribs on, close it down, and let them cook. Today, I'm cooking on my 500-gallon propane tank that we call the Beast, and I'm gonna load it up with some hickory and cherry wood. And no matter what smoker you're gonna use, just keep the temperature going at about 250 or 275 degrees. All right, I've had these ribs on for about an hour and a half. Let's check them out. All right, they are looking awesome. You're seeing that seasoning's starting to dry out, and that's exactly what we want. That way we know that it's starting to stick to the ribs. Everything's starting to look good. I still have some seasoning on my fingers. That's a little pitmaster trick. If that seasoning comes up and gets on your fingers, you know that it's not ready to be wrapped. So we're gonna put them right back in. We're gonna let them keep cooking. Now that I've got these ribs on the smoker, I just wanna talk to you guys and take you through my process of cooking ribs, and especially cooking competition ribs. A lot of people ask me about time and temp. How long do you go through each of these stages on the smoker? And sometimes it just doesn't work that way. I always go by what the meat's doing. So a lot of people like to use the 3-2-1 method, which means that it's 3 hours on the smoker, 2 hours wrapped up in foil with some kind of liquid, and then 1 hour with a glaze on the smoker. I don't really like to use that, especially for competition. Those are what I call grandma ribs, and those are ribs that are gonna fall off of the bone, and they're okay to eat, but especially for competition, you want a little bit of texture on your ribs. Now, what I like to use a method where clearly I don't use any time specifically. I'm always looking at the meat, and I'm always seeing what it's doing. So each rack of ribs is gonna be a little bit different. So what I look for in the first phase, after I put it on the smoker, I'm looking for the color and I'm looking for the bark. I wanna make sure the texture's nice. I wanna make sure that seasoning has had time to adhere to the meat and make sure that it has a really good color. In the second stage, I'm putting it in foil with brown sugar, butter, and honey, and I'm letting it get almost all the way done. That way it's super tender, but it's not quite fall off the bone. After that phase, I'm gonna take them out of the foil and put them on the smoker with a glaze. And I only want that glaze to sit for 15 or 20 minutes, just long enough to tack up on those ribs and give a great final presentation for those judges. All right, we've had these ribs on for about 2 hours and 45 minutes. Let's check them out. Oh yeah. They're starting to look really good. And remember earlier, I was talking about some things that I'm looking for. If I push down on this rib, none of that seasoning is coming off onto my fingers. It has a great color, so I'm ready to wrap these up. And let's go over to the cutting board so I can show you how I do that. All right, the first thing that I want to do is I want to lay down some brown sugar. So I'm gonna get some brown sugar. I'm gonna put that down. I'm gonna try to spread it out evenly, but don't be shy with this brown sugar. It's gonna make a sauce that we want to mix with our barbecue sauce later on for a glaze. Next, I'm gonna put some parquet squeezed butter. I'm just gonna go nice even coat all the way across there. Plenty of butter. All right, and last, I'm gonna put some honey for the money. And I'm definitely gonna be generous with this. That honey's gonna make those ribs sticky and sweet. All right, now what I wanna do is I wanna get these ribs and I wanna put them meat side down so that the bone side is up, and I'm gonna repeat the process right here. All right, now I've got 2 pieces of foil down here, and I wanna make sure that it's really tight. So I'm gonna wrap it around. We're just gonna wrap it one more time, just in case. And now that we've got these ribs wrapped, we're gonna put them on the smoker and let them cook until they're tender. All right, we've had these ribs wrapped up in our foil for about 1 hour and 30 minutes. Let's go ahead and check them out. Of course, you can't see anything yet. Let's take one of these off. I'm gonna put it on this pan just in case. And let's just get it unwrapped here. Oh yeah. Look at the color on that. Man, we're starting to get some pullback on those bones. Still flexible. Man, the color of that is amazing. Let's just get a feel. I'm not really doing this for temperature. I'm really just doing this to probe around and feel. We're almost there with these. And this is what I'm gonna do for these ribs, is I'm just gonna keep probing around. I'm gonna say they probably have about 30 more minutes until they are right where we want them. So I'm gonna wrap these up, get them right back on the smoker, and let them keep cooking. All right, we've had these ribs on for an additional 30 minutes. Let's check them out. Let's get one of these out of the foil here. Oh, it's feeling tender. Oh man, look at all the juices in there. Let's pick this up. Oh, it's nice and tender. And look at the color. Woo! Beautiful red mahogany color. That is awesome. Look at that. Still holds its weight. So I know that it's good, but I can just tell by feeling these. These are now right where I want them. And I can feel, and it feels just like butter. Man, oh man, these are perfect. Now, I want to show you what process I use to glaze them and get that final color that's really going to wow the judges. My secret recipe to making the perfect glaze is using 2 things. Number 1, my barbecue sauce, and number 2, all of the drippings from that brown sugar, butter, and honey that we've had in that foil. We're going to mix it all together for our final glaze. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to carefully take this foil and I'm going to dump that juice in a container. And what I'm going to do is I've got that mixture. Now I'm going to get my barbecue sauce in today. Like I said, I'm using Wishing Well house barbecue sauce. I'll pour that in there. Oh yeah, about half and half. Give it a nice little stir. Mix it up really good. Just check out that glaze. That has a beautiful color, and that's really going to complement these ribs. So I'm going to go ahead and put them right on the bottom rack here. Set them right there. And I'm going to get this glaze. Now I don't want to brush. I don't want a bunch of brush strokes. So I'm just going to dab this glaze on the ribs. Try to get it as even as possible. And I don't want to go extremely heavy. I just want to put a nice little glaze on these ribs. That right there looks so good. We're gonna let these sit in the smoker for 15 or 20 minutes. If you remember earlier, we said we don't wanna leave them in there for an hour. I think it just gets a little too dark for my taste personally, but just 15 or 20 minutes is all you need to let these tack up. All right, we let these ribs sit on the smoker with the glaze on there for about 20 minutes, and just look at this. I've got 4 racks of ribs, and anytime I'm doing a contest, I at least do 4 racks. That way I can always have some options and pick from the best ones. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just kind of looking to see which one I like, and I'm thinking that this one right here looks the best. The one that I just had. It's nice and thick, nice and meaty. It has a great color. So I'm gonna get all these over here. I'll set them aside. And this is gonna be the one that I used. And hey, I'm ready to slice into this. So, I've got my knife here. I've got a slicing knife. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn it right over so that I can follow along on those bones. And I'm always looking to make sure there's nothing on these ribs that I don't want a judge to see. So I'm looking especially in the middle here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go right down these bones. So right in the middle, nice, easy cut. Now I'm just gonna flip these over. Check out the ones that look the best. And I would say if I'm gonna pick from this rack, I'm definitely gonna pick these 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I would probably pick one from another rack. But for right now, I'm just gonna show you these 5, and look at that. Doesn't that look great? Here's what I'm gonna do. Before I would put it in the box, I've got some of this leftover glaze, and I'm just gonna take it and go right on the inside of this rib. Make sure I get that flavor on the side too. Really paying attention, getting some good flavor on there. Oh yeah, those look great. And hey, before I decide to take a bite, which trust me, I'm dying to get these ribs in my stomach for sure. They're gonna be so good. But before I do, I just wanna review what we did to get to this point. The first thing I did to get these ribs ready for the smoker is square them up. And I did that by cutting off each end and taking off the rib tips. After that, I went ahead and took off that chewy membrane. In order to season it, all I did was put some yellow mustard on the ribs as a binder and then liberally season it with my barbecue dry rub. Once that was done, I put it on the smoker and let it sit on there for 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is plenty of time to let that dry rub stick and get a really good color. After that, I took it off of the smoker and wrapped it in foil with a lot of butter, brown sugar, and honey, and put it right back on the smoker for about 2 hours until they were completely done. Once I was done with that, I was ready to glaze these ribs. And I did that by mixing half of that juice that was left in the foil with half of my barbecue sauce. I let them sit on the smoker for about 20 minutes just so that it could tack up. And here we are. Now we're ready to eat one of these ribs, and I cannot wait any longer. I've got to have one. I'm gonna get this one right in the middle, and just look at that. Super juicy, super tender, has a nice shape. Let's see if the bite through is good for us. Man, oh, that's a good rib. And especially for competition, one thing you're looking for, if you remember, we said we don't want them to fall off the bone, and check that out. That is a perfect bite through rib. It can easily pull off. Oh yeah, look at that. It can easily pull right off. You've got to try this. Even if you're not a competition person, this is going to be such an awesome rib to impress your friends. Thank you so much for watching today's video. We would love to have you join our Wishing Well BBQ family. Make sure you click that subscribe button below so that you don't miss out on any of the fun. Make sure you also follow us on all of our other socials. Facebook, Instagram, and now we have TikTok by searching Wishing Well BBQ. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, we'll see you next time.